Hi, my name is Armando Villaseca, Secretary of Education, and I want to welcome you to Education. Join the conversation. Today's show will focus on the implementation of our new standards in Vermont called the Common Core State Standards and the new assessment called the Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium. With me today are three folks from the field who are working in these areas. First, I have on my left Michael Hawk, who is our Assessment Director at the State Agency of Education. Next to him is Ellen Thompson, the Curriculum Coordinator at Essex Town School District. And next to my left is Julie Longchamp, the Professional Development Director at the Vermont NEA. And today's topics will be around those two areas. And I want to start right off the bat with Ellen, telling us a little bit about what you do. Julie will be asking you a little about what you do, and then Michael as well about what you do, and then we'll get into the questions.
Okay, my name's Ellen Thompson. I'm the Director of Instruction and Information Services in Essex Town, which basically, if you think of the two categories of technology and curriculum, that's what I work with. So I'm in charge of the curriculum and helping teachers to facilitate that curriculum so that we have successful learning for all students in Essex.
Great. Julie?
I'm Julie Longchamp, and I am the new Director of Professional Programs at Vermont NEA. I taught in Williston for 25 years, retiring just this past June, so I'm fresh out of the classroom. And my role at Vermont NEA is really looking at professional needs of teachers and ESPs.
Good, thank you. Michael?
And I'm Michael Hawk, and I have the great pleasure of working for Secretary Villaseca at the Vermont Agency of Education as the State Director of Educational Assessment.
Great. So we have three, and Ellen, you also were a longtime teacher.
Oh, yeah, a primary school teacher for 21 years, and I also taught at the university level.
Great. So what we have here is a really strong set of folks who have a lot of experience. So, Ellen, I guess one of the questions is, why are we changing to new standards?
I think if we think about our society right now and the way kids are learning and what they're learning and how much they can learn, the Common Core State Standards actually give us a vehicle to get a consistent language across states and across different geographic areas. Our population is much more mobile, so having a child who moves in from Alabama or out to Texas is not as much of a problem when you have a consistent language of standards in the nation. I also think the standards put an emphasis on what kids can do with their learning versus having it checked off that they learned it. So this is about relevance and about getting it into the hearts and souls of kids and teachers.
So much more applied, if you will, than just filling in the boxes and making sure that kids know a particular area. Yeah. So, Julie, what are the benefits, I guess, of going, Ellen talked a little bit about that. What are some of the other benefits of the Common Core State Standards?
Well, I think one benefit is that there are fewer standards. So we, in our old standards, I guess they're old since we're actually using Common Core State Standards this year, we had so many of them that it was really hard to have deep learning of those standards. So we heard mile wide, inch deep. We have fewer standards, so hopefully students can really learn those standards and apply those standards to the learning in the classroom. I also think that the expectations, we talked about mobility, that will be the same since 45 states have adopted the Common Core State Standards, that with these similar expectations, again with mobility, we have a common level of achievement, which will help when they go to higher ed or the workforce. So many students, when they got to the college level, need remedial courses. Right. We want to avoid that.
Right. And Armando, if I may add, I'd like to jump onto what Julie just said, that I'm kind of impressed with the Common Core effort because it's one of the first times that nationwide, we've tried to take on a national problem by putting a structure into education that will address that problem. And so again, I've been fortunate to be working on the Common Core pretty much since the beginning. And it really began with two major problems. First of all, that we all know the economy has been bad. We also know that there's a lot of information that creates at least the perception that our students in the United States aren't doing as well as students internationally. And also there was a lot of data at the time, which is still true, and that is that students go on to college and graduating successfully from high school, and they're not prepared to do college work, so they have to take remedial courses in mathematics or writing. And so the Common Core was developed around this notion of students being ready to be successful in college or when they enter the workforce. And so unlike our current standards, which were kind of developed from the bottom up, that is, we tried to define what third graders ought to be able to do and fourth graders and so forth, when they developed the Common Core, they brought experts together on the workforce and college and college readiness, and they decided what it took to be college ready, and then they developed the standards down from there.
Michael, I want you to clarify this just to make sure that when you say that we got together, Julie mentioned that there are 40 some odd states that are now adopted these. These were not federal standards. These are states
Not at all.
adopted.
Yep.
Can you just give a little bit of a 30-second sort of
Well, sure,
overview?
and actually I think this is something Vermonters can be proud of, that the Common Core was developed through a collaboration of the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers, which is an organization that represents all the people who have
I belong to.
Armando's job, that Armando's a member. And the reason I say Vermonters can be proud is that our former governor, Jim Douglas, was the head of the National Governors Association when the Common Core was developed, and they were developed under his watch with great encouragement from him to the other governors to join in this effort.
And it really was a bipartisan effort. He was a Republican working with a Democratic president, which is, I think, a model that our elected officials in Washington should be following. Thank you. Now, Ellen, one of the things that I want to just address is these are standards. These are not. This is not the curriculum, what we
Right.
actually teach in the classroom. And we talked a little bit earlier about that. Could you just give folks a little idea of what that means?
The standards are a set of documents that support the learning of students, but school districts need to take those standards and then shape them into the curriculum that's taught. So they're the core ideas, the essential learnings, if you will, are held within the standards. But again, they're not a roadmap. They're not a checkoff list. In the past, our previous documents were much more a set of test indicators that teachers could check off as they finished them. These standards are going to live in multiple units across the year and across years. So they really are a bigger texture to the learning unit. Not sure if I put the right words to that, but.
Julie, you want to?
Well, I'll give you an example. Last year, so I was in Chittenden South, and we were developing units around the Common Core state standards. So I worked with my team member, and we created a unit on World War I. And as we developed our social studies unit around World War I, we were pulling standards from the Common Core that had to do with reading, standards from the Common Core that had to do with writing, with speaking and listening. And we developed learning opportunities for students where they could learn and then demonstrate achievement of those standards. And we did that for multiple units throughout the year. So I think that's one of the shifts, that it's English language arts, but it's not just the English language arts teacher that will be using these standards. It goes across curriculum areas.
You also described a wonderful way of teaching where teachers collaborate and interdisciplinary, bringing in different content areas to address a topic or an area that they're studying. So
Exactly. And I think one of the best practices that we did with our district is all of these units were completed, were worked on during in-service days, and then shared throughout the district, so other teachers throughout the district could use those units.
And one of the other, with sharing, I think, is one of those things that we don't do well in education. But one of the things that this will do will allow not just districts to share, but states to share. So what Ellen is doing here in Vermont could be then incorporating something going on in Montana or in Colorado, which is it's a nice benefit. Now, Michael, just for a second, I know, and we're going to keep going back to the Common Core, but So now we have these new standards. We're currently using the NECAP assessment, New England Common Assessment Program, but we're switching to a new assessment. You want to just tell us a little bit about that?
Well, sure, and actually, this is sort of because of the work I do anyway, I see it this way, that it's one of the great benefits of adopting new standards, because when you adopt the new standards, you can't have the same tests. This is interesting how this fell in place too, but also President Obama's administration had some American Recovery Act monies available, and so they decided to put that behind an effort where they would bring states together to develop new assessments. And you know, I'm one of those people that every time we would do something with our New England Common Assessment Program, about a week later I would think of a way we could have done it better. And this has been a great opportunity because everybody knows you just have to look around, that we're doing so many fascinating things with computers. So we're going to be measuring the Common Core with absolutely state-of-the-art assessments that are delivered by computer. And I know later maybe you'll ask me to get into
No, I
this.
want to go into, tell me what some of the neat things are
Okay.
about the assessment.
Okay, well, I got to do this one first.
Okay.
This is big to me, but maybe not big to everybody else. But my background is working with students with disabilities, and I've spent a lot of time working on the new test, focusing on how we can make this test meaningful and friendly to our students who have special needs. And so by delivering the assessment on computer, we're going to have things like we can use text-to-speech, which is on everybody's computer now, but on the math problem, so that we don't turn a math
Text-to-speech, tell me what
problem.
that means, Michael,
Sure.
so people may
Okay.
know.
Well, so on the math test, so that we're not measuring kids' reading skills, we're measuring their math skills instead, that the text-to-speech option on a computer will read the problem to the student.
Good.
So they'll wear headphones, and so there's a lot of things like that, that there are ways that for students who have visual impairments, it'll blow the screen up into larger font sizes.
What if I don't speak English?
If you don't speak English, that's a place where we're really proud of the work we've done. We, working with one of our contractors, we've developed both full translations of the test into Spanish and American Sign Language, interestingly enough. And then also in as many as about 50 languages, we'll have these things that are called keyword translation glossaries, so that the keywords in the problem, if you don't speak English well, you can hover your mouse over the word, and a glossary will pop up, and it'll give you the word translated into your native language, whatever it is. And you know, just like in English and other languages, there may be 4 or 5 words to mean the same thing to translate. It translates exactly into the term or the use of that term that's implied in the problem. So that's going to be really terrific.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I know that when we give the kneecap, we have a lot of accommodations. And it takes quite some time to look at our students and figure out, well, who's going to read this part of the test to this student?
That's right.
And they have to be out of the room from their peers, which stigmatizes them. And I'm just so pleased to see that they will be able to take this test with their peers
Well,
in their
thank you, because
classrooms.
you know, Julie, that's really one of the goals we had. I think that although the intentions were good, you're absolutely right that some of the ways with our current testing system that we serve kids were humiliating, because everybody wants to know, how come Julie left the class when we all took the test? But now every child's sitting at a computer, every child's wearing headphones because that's part of the test, so nobody really knows if Michael is having the math problem read to him or whether he's reading it himself. So it's very friendly to the kids.
Michael, the last question, at least for now, on the Smarter Balance assessment. Tell me about the adaptability.
Sure, and like I said, I was going to start with the thing that's most dear to my
I
heart
know.
because I've been working on it. So Smarter Balanced is really, it meets this definition of next generation testing because it uses a technology known as computer adaptive testing. And before I tell you how it works, I have to tell you that the benefit is that it's actually more accurate than what we're doing now, but it'll actually take students less time in testing to
mentioned
get
that,
that accurate
yes.
score. And so the way it works is that a student will start out taking a test question that's about the middle of their grade level. And if they get it right, then they'll get a problem that's slightly harder. If they get it wrong, they'll get a problem that's slightly easier. And the computer algorithms continue to do that until it comes up with the most accurate score it can. Most people know, like in presidential polling, they'll say, it's plus or minus 13. So this does the same thing around the student's ability level, that it continues to deliver items either harder or easier until it shrinks that margin of error as small as it can go. And so you end up with something that's very accurate. And also our current tests, without me, putting people to sleep with getting into all the psychometrics,
No.
our current tests...
Because it is late at night when many watching the show anyway.
So we don't want to do that. But so our current tests are really most accurate in the middle, because that's where we cluster all the items on those bubble in the, pencil in the bubble, that type of test. But whereas with this custom selection of items for the student across the scale, it takes less items and to get to an accurate score. And by the way, the beauty of this, getting back to being friendly to kids, that we have students now who sit down to our current fill in the bubble test and they can't answer a single question because it's just above their level.
Too hard.
But with this new computer adaptive model, every student, no matter whether you're the brightest or the least bright, you'll get about half your questions you can answer and about half you can't.
So just, and I
Very
want to go
friendly
back,
students.
I want to go back to Common Core, but my last question is, so if the four of us, Ellen and Julie and I, and you, Michael, we're all sixth graders taking the same assessment, we wouldn't necessarily be taking having the same questions, is that right, from what you described?
That's right. There will probably be some overlap, but there's a big pool of questions at each grade level that measure the Common Core skills across that grade level. And depending on how you do in the adaptive part of it, maybe I'm getting all questions from the bottom part of the
Right.
pool. The fish is diving down and getting me questions from the bottom. But for brighter kids, maybe they're pulling them all from the top. So it's all out of the same grade level, and sort of, it's what we call a learning progression, that the test items are developed along a learning progression for the same skill.
Which brings us right back to the Common Core, because the Common Core
Yes.
is based on sets of learning progressions, which I think go back to what Michael said before, that with starting at the end in mind, instead of creating the standards as we thought they should be, they actually went to the end product and then backed up to see what you would need in order to do responses like this or to have applications like this. And I think that's a more real-time learning piece.
Right.
The other piece I wanted to piggyback on Michael with the testing piece with the SBAC, because of the fact that it's a computer adapted technology, it actually should change the face of testing in the classroom, whereas before, all life as we know it in a school
Yes.
shuts down. You can't be out for recess, there's no noise outside the window, you can't have everything's locked up at night, the pencils are sharpened, and everybody's attitude and
They better be
demeanor
anyway.
feels
Yes.
like I'm in a test-taking mode. With this type of technology, teachers can have groups of kids in their classroom actually
right.
take the assessment at different times across a longer window of
3
time.
months.
And I think that's a really important thing for us to understand and actually impart to our teachers, because we have a long history of the other type of testing. So this will be a new piece for teachers.
And Ellen, not just teachers, but we all do. That's how we remember testing. So what you just described, I think, is a very important component that I hope resonates.
And even though I hate to say this, when you're doing a test like that where it is all sort of lockdown model, the teacher's affect is
Of
very
course.
different
Oh,
than
oh,
when
no
you're in a
question.
slightly more relaxed piece
That's
too.
right,
And I think
that's right.
this will allow kids to feel more comfortable in the testing.
But we do still want them to get a good night's sleep and eat a breakfast
Yes, you
beforehand.
do. Absolutely.
We were fortunate enough to do a pilot last year in
Yes, we
Williston,
were.
and one thing that we learned, we did an 8th grade math, our team took it in the dining room with laptops, and one team took it in the computer lab where the computers are close together, and it was much better in the dining room in Williston where they had room for paper. So I think, learning where would be the best environment to take this test, where kids would have would be most comfortable was an important lesson.
And I think we need to do later on in the year something a little bit more detailed about some of these benefits and, but is there enough technology, the computers, and all those things. But going back to the Common Core, one of the questions that I wanted to ask earlier, Ellen, was, what's happening in schools right now? And then I want to ask you, Julie, about the challenges.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay?
Well, schools are pretty much abuzz with what's
Is it?
happening, so
Yes.
it's a busy place. And I can use Essex Town as an example, but we've spent the last 2 years really looking at the Common Core, developing vertical teams of teachers so that we have go-to people in each of our buildings and each of our grade levels. So certain people in the district have been going to trainings regionally to really understand and unpack and begin to use the Common Core. This year is an implementation year, so this is the year that everybody is really immersed. All of our in-service time is being used by teachers to develop units of study and to create the frameworks or our curriculum guarantees. So in other words, these standards are not the curriculum. We
Gotcha.
still have to mold those into what we want kids to know, understand, and be able to do. And that's a local decision around that curriculum frame. But teachers are busy. They're really into it. They're really unpacking the standards, the language. Lots of work going on.
Yeah. And I would say that I would assume that that's happening across the state, but Julie, I know that there's some challenges.
Well, I've been fortunate enough to be able in my new job to go around and get a sense of a pulse of where people are in implementing the Common Core standards. And it really does vary depending upon where you are. And the population that is least familiar are the ESPs who work with some of our most challenging students.
What's an ESP?
And educational support personnel.
Okay.
Paraprofessionals.
Paraprofessionals, thank you.
That are working in the classroom, and I've done 2 trainings on the ELA standards, and I start by, raise your hand, 1 finger for I've heard of it, but that's all I know about the Common Core. 5 meaning I've actually implemented it and I'm working with it, and they are all ones, except for a handful. So I think that this is the year I think paraprofessionals need to be educated on what they are as well, because it's going to impact their job.
And I think that also is a challenge, and I know in the northwest part of the state, there's a strong collaboration amongst superintendents, principals, curriculum coordinators. There seems to be a lot of sharing of information. What about some of those parts of the state that maybe don't have that strong bond that maybe we see in some parts? Are you seeing some challenges in schools there?
Well, I think school districts are now feeling the heat because this is year 1 of implementation. So I am getting some calls from school districts. We had a group of national board certified teachers that received a grant to create training for teachers that are other than ELA and math teachers. So it's your art teachers and music teachers and physical education teachers, and what will the Common Core state standards mean to them? And this group of teachers have created some workshops and are implementing those workshops to support those teachers. So
Ellen, as a curriculum coordinator, Julie just raised areas in school, subject areas that are not being assessed as part of our Smarter Balance assessment. But they're also responsible they also have standards. Could you tell us a little bit about, in your view, about what's happening in Essex Town, let's say, or within the region, with the art teachers, with the foreign language teachers?
Actually, regionally, there's been a lot happening.
Has
So
it?
we
Great.
have
Good.
actually offered Common Core workshops, if you will, or conferences for PE teachers, music teachers, and art teachers. The Common Core, at a certain level, 6th grade, I guess it is, has a whole set of content literacy standards, which basically says that we're all teachers of literacy. And what it asks people to do at that level, and I would contend earlier than that too, so it's not just at 6th grade, it asks people that when you're being literate in your subject area, you need to share with kids how you do that. So if I'm a science teacher, for instance, and I'm having kids read a science journal, a scientist reads that journal differently than a literary English teacher does. So therefore, the Common Core really pushes the fact that we all have to impart that knowledge to kids. How does a scientist use it? How does a mathematician read a problem? It's different than. Right. So I think there's a lot of effort. As I said, regionally, there's definitely a lot of effort. In Essex Town, and I think a lot of places are doing this, we use a professional learning communities model. So all of those people have their own professional learning community that they're working in to get at how it will impact them. And that's been truly the best thing that we've done is we've set up ways for teachers to talk, collaborate, and make decisions together around how the implementation will look. So it's very empowering.
Right.
Actually, Armando, can I jump
Yeah,
off
I was
on
going to
that?
ask you about
Sure, but because I think that Ellen's raising a great point here, and it's a strength of the Common Core beyond what we're doing now. But actually, I think this is okay because this is going to air later on. But
2 weeks.
2 weeks from now, okay. So a week ago, for you folks who are watching this, Vermont released its science results, most current science results, and they were not as good as we would hope. Let me just put it that way. But so when we, particularly for fourth graders, and when we dug into the results to find out what was going on, what we discovered was that our science test has a third of the test that's known as an inquiry session, where kids actually do a hands-on kind of science experiment. And then what they have to do is they have to cite the data they gathered from their experiment and draw conclusions and make a logical argument around their conclusions, which they put on paper using their writing skills. They have to use the language of science to communicate as a scientist would communicate. And they often also have to read something before they do this. And so it's interesting that the test seems to be showing not so much a weakness in their knowledge in science, but their ability to communicate using the language of science. And this, I think, is going to be a real strength of the Common Core because it actually now has that kind of skill embedded in the English language arts standards. That students need to be able to read and think and communicate with the language of social studies or with the language of science or the other content areas.
Now, we have been talking about reading, language arts, and math, and in science as well. We have a science assessment. Michael, as an assessment coordinator director at the state, what about art? What about foreign language? What about social studies? How do we assess those? And tell me a little bit about that.
Well,
it's part of our accountability.
yes, it is. This is. Let me state that this is always a concern, and it's one I have too. That the federal law put the emphasis on reading and mathematics as sort of indicators of school quality. The Common Core is going to expand that now by, as we were saying, moving English language arts into content areas like science and social studies. And also it's adding reading it's adding listening and speaking to the skills we measure in English language arts. But I think we're still in a situation where those areas you're talking about, like the arts or physical education, won't be explicitly assessed by the state, and that is a problem. And I think it's something that we have to really work on because, unfortunately, and I think we've tried not to have this happen in Vermont, but unfortunately, we've got to a point that nationally we value most what we test, and it probably ought to be the other way around. I think the one place though that where we can find kind of a happy medium on this is that there's no reason why we can't use the arts or physical movement or drama as ways to help kids learn those standards. And somebody was talking about those kind of interdisciplinary units. And again, a plug for Smarter Balanced. Another thing that's going to do this different than what we're doing now is that it's going to combine classroom-based performance tasks with the more typical kind of short problem type of testing. And that's a place where students can use a variety of approaches to expressing their knowledge, including the arts and drama and music and so forth. So I think at least in Vermont, we're not forgetting that those are important skills. And we're fortunate to belong to the Smarter Balance Consortium, where those skills will also be valued.
Now, we have about 2 minutes to go. Is there anything that I didn't ask that Julie or Ellen, you want to, and it's okay if we go over 2 minutes because we can go over.
I do have a comment that because there are 45 states that have adopted the Common Core state standards, the quality and number of online resources for teachers to access to support them in their development of their curriculum is amazing. So even Vermont NEA has a Common Core toolkit. The NEA Great Public Schools Network have full of resources and videos, and BetterLesson.com is another NEA-sponsored website that will have videos for teachers to look at. So there's just such a huge source of information out there for teachers. It's not like they're just Vermont standards. It's
Ellen?
No, I think I'd go along with Julie, too. There is a lot out there. I would actually say there's probably too much out
much.
there right at the moment, and that for teachers trying to sort through, and
Yes.
people, curriculum coordinators, trying to quiet the voices in the room, so to speak. What I found is worked the best is having small groups of teachers within grade level or content area and really digging into it themselves. And that flies in the face of going to buy a program or bring a program
Right.
in. We're in a learning stage right now, so we need to, I really feel like we need to understand what's held inside those standards, and it's hard to do that by taking it, something that's already created. And even though that's a lot of work, I think there is a beauty to sort of the messiness that's happening right now in a good way. Teachers really talking out the language of the standards and saying, well, what does that mean to you? Because really, it's most important in what it means to, if we were all those 4th, 6th grade teachers and we're all teaching in the same district, for a child to go from one room to the other, we should have a consistency
That's right.
of what our expectations are. And that, I think, is what's being developed right now with teachers. When they're working in those PLCs or in those grade level groups or content level groups, they're coming to agreement around their understanding for what's held in those standards. And then their units come out of that. And I think it's really kind of exciting work.
And it really is. I think the opportunities that this is creating more collaboration amongst grade levels in between teachers in the same school or in the same district, the opportunities that are available from out of state and online through different resources is really, I think, a convergence of some of the best knowledge that we have. So I hope you found this show educational and that you learned a lot about our new assessment and our new standards that we'll be implementing. And again, thank you for joining our show, Education. Join the conversation, and we'll see you next month.